I'm Beck and welcome to my spoiler recap for Nevermoor, WUNDERSMITH and HOLLOWPOX, the first 3 books in the Morrigan Crow series. I'm going to recount all of the plot points and characters across all 3 of these books so you are ready to go into Silverborn, the 4th book. So obviously if you haven't read any of these, don't watch this because it's prolific spoilers. And without further ado, let's jump into Nevermoor, book 1. Morrigan Crow, our main character, was born on an unlucky day. Therefore she is cursed and she's also blamed for all the local misfortunes. This curse also means that Morrigan is due to die on Eventide, which is a year from now, on her 12th birthday, and she's currently 11. Morrigan's father Corvus is the Chancellor of Great Wolfacre, which is where Crow Manor is located, where Morrigan has grown up, and this is within one of the largest states in the Wintersea Republic. An event called Bid Day happens, which is when mentors bid on children in order for them to become scholars. It's kind of like a scholarship situation, so children might get one bid or several, and those are like the scholarship offers of a sort. Morrigan just tags along because she wanted to go to bid day and does not expect to receive 4 bids of her very own. Obviously her father is not a very supportive person, so he doesn't want anything to go ahead with these bids, but according to the law, Morrigan is obliged to meet with her bidders, and so that's what she wants to do. Morrigan meets Mr. Jones, who is Ezra Squall's assistant. Ezra runs Squall Industries, and aside from the president of the Wintersea Republic, he is pretty much the most powerful person in the Republic. He essentially controls the use and the production of wonder, which is magic in this world. Ezra has bid on Morrigan to become his student and his heir, and Mr. Jones is pushing for her to sign the contract when her father interrupts them. He says that all the bids were actually a prank and that nobody showed up, and when Morrigan turns around to tell them about Mr. Jones, she realizes that he's completely vanished. Unexpectedly, the city clock chimes, which signals that Eventide has come, and it's come a year early. Later that night, a letter slips itself under Morrigan's door, and it is a second offer from Jupiter North, who bid on her initially on bid day. The letter of offer includes a contract which offers her a place in the Wondrous Society. Morrigan signs it, but she throws it into the fire, not convinced that she's going to live past midnight to see what this letter holds for her anyway. But she's visited at her house by Jupiter North himself, who somehow tricks her horrible family into thinking that she has already passed on, and then he spirits her away. On board Jupiter's spider-shaped ship called Octavia, they go through a portal in the town's clock face, escaping from the hunt of smoke and shadow and appearing in the free 5th state called Nevermoor. By crossing over the border from going from the Republic into Nevermoor, they have essentially skipped forward several hours in time, so they've skipped from midnight into the first day of spring, which has jumped straight past Morrigan's Eventide end of days moment. She's essentially cheated death. Jupiter owns the Hotel Deucalion, which he takes Morrigan to, and this is now her new home. We also meet Fenestra, or Fen as she's called, and she's not only the housekeeper of the Hotel Deucalion, she's also a giant talking Magnificat. Later on, the hotel's whole chandelier falls, and Morrigan is convinced that her curse has followed her. She sneaks out at night to inspect the damage and what it's done, and she runs into Mr. Jones. He's equally surprised that she's alive, and he says that Squall is still interested in her. He asks what she's doing at this random hour, and they both look at the chandelier, but he points out that a new one seems to be growing and that the hotel doesn't always stay the same, and Morrigan is just relieved that it's not her curse that's followed her through to Nevermoor. The next morning, Jupiter visits Morrigan and says that she is going to be his candidate for the Wondrous Society, so when she gets put forward, she is going to be submitted to undertake 4 trials. The 4th trial, though, is a talent trial, and Morrigan doesn't have a knack, like a special ability or a magical ability, and so she's quite worried about it, but Jupiter tells her not to worry and that he'll take care of it. Jupiter has an ability or a knack himself, and he is actually a witness, so it's not really a fortune teller, it's not seeing into the future, but he sees things the way they are. He also reassures Morrigan that she is not a curse on anyone, and she never has been. Later, at a Wondrous Society party for patrons and candidates, Morrigan stands up to this nasty girl Noelle, who is bullying someone. Then out of nowhere, a boy dumps jelly out of a window far above them, and the jelly lands on Noelle's head. Obviously, she storms away, and the boy who put the jelly onto Noelle's head in the first place is named Hawthorne, and they become fast friends, Morrigan and Hawthorne. The first trial happens. It is a written exam and 500 candidates are whittled down. Morrigan manages to pass. Before she goes into the questioning room though, she sees Noelle's friend tell 2 boys that they're not going to pass. And then after the exam, she sees those same boys and they were crying to their patron saying that they'd forgotten everything. Morrigan also touches one of the fire blossom trees that has been dormant for more than 100 years and she recoils saying that it burned her. Jupiter reassures her that it's extinct and then when she touches it again, nothing happens. It's now summer break and Hawthorne is visiting Morrigan at Hotel Deucalion. They find a cool shadow room and the shadows take on lives of their own, but then Morrigan freaks out when one of the wolf shadows becomes a bit more lifelike than they expected and it escapes into the hotel. Jupiter's nephew Jack is in residence for the summer and they explain the escaped shadow to him and he explains that they should split up to find it. While they're split up, Morrigan again runs into Mr. Jones and he reinforces that Squall's offer is still on the table. Mr. Jones is also familiar with the hotel and he says that the shadows usually fade on their own after a period of time anyway. This leads Morrigan to being furious with Jack about telling her to go track it down when the shadow is just going to fade out anyway. After the summer break, it is time for the chase trial and you must submit a steed to ride that has no less than 2 legs and no greater than 4 legs. It is also a game of strategy rather than a race. Fen the Magnificat submits herself as Morrigan's ride. The chase trial has 300 candidates enter, however there are only 150 coloured rings and 5 golden rings at the very centre of this strategic maze. At the beginning, before everyone is set off, Noelle is wearing a golden ribbon, so she somehow knew about the golden rings before they were announced. And if you hit one of the golden rings, it gives you a ticket to the secret dinner with the elders after the chase trial has concluded. Morrigan wonders how Noelle knew this secret and she also worries that Jupiter doesn't tell her everything. In the midst of the trial, she also thinks that Fen is aiming for a green target, but the Magnificat's pride pushes her forward and Fen says, no, we're going for a gold target. Cadence, who is Noelle's friend and hasn't been very nice throughout this whole journey, she was running next to Morrigan on her own rhinoceros steed, trying to knock Morrigan out of the way. But unfortunately, the rhinoceros gets the better of her and Cadence is about to fall. Before she's crushed, Morrigan and Fen manage to save her. And then Fen goes for the golden target, but as she's about to reach out and hit it, Cadence hits it at exactly the same time. After this event, Cadence talks to the guard and convinces him that she was riding Fen the whole time, and so therefore she's the one who hit the golden ring, not Morrigan. Understandably, Morrigan is furious, and as she's about to be arrested by the police, which they call the Stink, an official comes over and congratulates her, saying that she actually passed the trial, which means that she can't be arrested. It turns out someone cheated with their steed, so there was a free place, and that means Morrigan is safe because she can't be kicked out of the Wondrous Society if she is a candidate. Because she's come from the Republic, it's technically illegal for her to be there, but her being a candidate is a loophole in her legal allowance to stay. Halloween then comes and there is a festival and Fen takes Hawthorne and Morrigan to see the sights. Morrigan learns about the Wundersmith legend about the man who became a monster and was exiled from Nevermoor. At the Halloween festival, Morrigan hears a voice and thinks she's helping a lady who's stuck down a sewer, but it turns out to be a trick and she has now been invited to the fright trial. Morrigan enters the gate to the fright trial, but she realizes that Hawthorne has also entered as well. Before they can both continue forward, Cadence joins them and hesitates at continuing forward, pushing Morrigan ahead of her. After Morrigan and Hawthorne complete the fright trial, Morrigan brings up Cadence and how she was pushed, and Hawthorne doesn't remember who she's even talking about. Mr. Jones also runs into both of them after they pass the fright trial, and he asks Morrigan if she has a knack yet, but Hawthorne is distracted and desperate to get back to Fen so they don't miss the last train on the Wonderground. Morrigan finally tells Hawthorne about Mr. Jones and Ezra Squall bidding on her. Fen overhears parts of their conversation and startles when she recognizes Ezra Squall's name, saying that he's the evilest man to ever live and he was that Wundersmith. Over the Christmas break, Jack, Jupiter's nephew, is also staying at the hotel again and they go to a Christmas festival where there's a friendly rivalry between Saint Nick and the Snow Queen. Unfortunately, on Christmas Day, Jupiter is called away for work. He does work for the Wondrous Society as a Wondrous Society member. Later that night though, Morrigan manages to catch Jupiter and she confronts him about the fact that she's scared that she doesn't have a knack and that she's going to be kicked out of the Wondrous Society and that she just wants to go home. And he takes her to a train station where they leave their brollies behind as anchors and they use the Gossamer line to go to Jackalfax to visit Crow Manor. So that means that they are there in spirit and consciousness, but not there in body. Morrigan can see her family this way, but they can't see her. But then Morrigan sees her grandmother, which Jupiter and herself reveal themselves to. And her grandmother doesn't seem surprised to see Jupiter. She says, "Why did you bring her back? That Morrigan is in danger here from the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow. You need to leave now." It turns out that Morrigan's grandmother is the one who signed the contract to let Morrigan go to the Wondrous Society in the first place. When they return to the hotel, Dame Chanda, who is one of the residents of the hotel, gives Morrigan an oil painting picture of Ezra Squall. She says he'd be well over 100 by now, and don't tell anyone, but she thinks he's handsome, if you can even call a mass murderer handsome. Morrigan looks at the picture and realizes that it's Mr. Jones. Morrigan goes to tell Jupiter about all that she's discovered, but Jupiter is once again gone, and the show trial is tomorrow. At the show trial, Hawthorne for his dragon riding prowess and Noelle for her singing ability both make it into the top candidates for getting into the Wondrous Society. Cadence also appears at the show trial with a video showing all past events of how she mesmerized people into doing what she wanted them to do, and immediately she jumps into first place. When it's Morrigan's turn to step up for the show trial, Jupiter appears with her and goes up to each one of the judges, pressing his head against theirs, and with unanimous decision, they don't say anything except that Morrigan has now jumped to first place. After the trial, the judges, Jupiter and Morrigan, are all in a room and they're deliberately not saying what her knack is, but it's clear that she's a risk, and that's why Jupiter has been disappearing so frequently, so that he can obtain signatories for a security pact, which one of the judges is convinced to sign as well, and now Jupiter only needs one more signature. After they all exit the room, Morrigan is approached by the Stink, the police, because technically she's not a candidate of the trials anymore, but she's not quite in the society yet, so it's a grey area where she can be arrested. Unexpectedly, Cadence comes to Morrigan's rescue, and she convinces the Stink that the poster they're holding is actually Morrigan's passport. Cadence said that she did the favour for Morrigan because nobody else remembers her. Manestra, who is summoned by Jupiter, takes Hawthorne and Morrigan home on the train, and this is when Morrigan realises that Ezra Squall has been using the Gossamer line to technically get into Nevermoor, even if his body is not in Nevermoor. He's here more like a ghost. She tells Fen about seeing him, and Hawthorne backs her up, saying that he saw him too. The train is delayed and stops mid-ride, and Morrigan is engulfed by the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow, and she wakes up on a different train platform. Sitting nearby is Ezra Squall himself, who was formerly known as Mr. Jones to her, and he confirms that he sent the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow after her, not to kill her, but to herd her. He takes her back to Crow Manor and demonstrates his power as a wondersmith, remaking the home into a theme park and then tearing it down brick by brick, all the while telling Morrigan that she knows what she is, and he seems disappointed when Morrigan doesn't say it herself, so he ends up telling her that she is a wondersmith as well. Morrigan says that she'll never be like him, and Squall insists that he will gladly be her teacher for the wretched arts of the accomplished wondersmith, to teach her everything that he knows. He also reveals that the curse never actually existed, and it was a way to explain why Eventide-born children eventually kick the bucket. It's because they absorb wonder, and before they can become too powerful and dilute the wonder, Squall eliminates them himself because he doesn't want anyone else tapping into the power and diluting it. He wants it all for himself. Morrigan is overcome from this revelation, and she sends out a burst of white light, and that scatters and banishes the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow and temporarily stuns Squall as well. He says that Morrigan doesn't need to accept his offer. By turning 11 and passing Eventide, she has become his apprentice anyway. If Morrigan doesn't learn to control it, wonder will eventually harness her, and with this revelation, Squall departs. Later in Jupiter's study, Jupiter presses his forehead against Morrigan's in the same way that he did to the judges at the show trial, and he shows Morrigan what he sees as a witness, which is a blinding white light of wonder surrounding her. Morrigan tells Jupiter about Squall, but all along Jupiter has known what she was because he could see it, and he knew that Squall bit on her at the beginning of the book as well. Morrigan realizes that Jack was so indignant because he's also a witness, so he knew about her as well. Jupiter explains that the witness ability for Jack, because he's quite young and hasn't learned how to filter yet, he uses his eye patch as a way to filter the world so he doesn't get overwhelmed. Jupiter also finally gives Morrigan her official gold W Wondrous Society pin. Morrigan thinks that it seemed tiny, but it was also a big promise of family, belonging and friendship, but in the back of her mind she knows that Squall won't give up. And that is the end of book 1, and now I'll move into talking about book 2. And that is Wondersmith, which opens with Jupiter and Morrigan visiting the singer and celestial being Israfel. Israfel is the last signature on the safeguard letter to protect Morrigan. Israfel also says that his and Jupiter's mutual friend Cassiel has just up and disappeared, which is impossible, and the Hotel Deucalion throws Morrigan a 12th birthday party. party. After the party, Morrigan wakes up, but she's not alone. She's with other new Wondrous Society members standing at the gates to Wunzock. Unit 919, which is where Morrigan belongs, those 9 members are officially welcomed to the Wondrous Society. All of them at this point are told that Morrigan is a Wundersmith. The elders declare that if any one of the group of Unit 919 break this trust, then all 9 of them will be expelled from the Wondrous Society. A golden W also appears on Morrigan's index finger, and Jupiter says this is how Wondrous Society members recognize each other. Then Morrigan's bedroom at the Hotel Deucalion grows a second door, and she can't initially get into it, but after a few days there are knocks on it from the other side, and it's the Wondrous Society summoning her to begin her classes. All Unit 919 members have their own doors to access this Wonderground, which is the train line in Nevermoor, and they've got a personalized train called Home Train. Their conductor and guide, Miss Cheery, introduces herself before they depart to their first day of classes, which is day 1 of the next 5 years of their lives. But their orientation is messed up when Paximus Luck was supposed to give their tour and he's mysteriously missing. Instead, they get the scholar mistress that everyone is afraid of, Dearborn/Murgatroyd, and Morrigan's unit all get their own exciting classes, but Morrigan doesn't get the same. Hers all get denied because of her Wundersmith status, and she's only given 1 class instead, and it is the history of heinous wondrous acts with Professor Hemingway Q. Onstalled. All Morrigan does in these classes is read about past Wundersmiths and how terrible they were, and it turns out the book that she's reading and studying is written by the exact same professor that's taking the class, and he just reinforces that there's no hope for her as a Wundersmith. Therefore, Morrigan's first week of class is absolutely awful, and she leaves class one day and takes the Wonderground just to escape. She explores too far by accident and runs into a skeletal figure near the River Douro, and then she flees back to the Wonderground station and back to the hotel. She feels guilty too because she promised Jupiter that she wouldn't wander around and venture out, and the fact that she did go a bit too far means that she broke her promise to Jupiter. Jupiter, though, has been away on private business for Morrigan's whole first week, and he's investigating the disappearances of 2 people and also of a Magnificub. But when Morrigan finally gets to see him, she reports how terrible her classes have been. Jupiter then promises to do 2 things. One of those things is to prove that the Wundersmiths were good, and the other thing is to get her classes amended and do something about the single class that she's taking that she hates. He pushes the scholar mistress and ends up having all of Unit 919 in a class together, where they are undertaking the subject called Decoding Nevermoor. Mildmay, the teacher, shares a living map of Nevermoor, and Morrigan absolutely loves it. A few weeks later, there is now camaraderie building with Unit 919 because they're all taking this shared class, and Morrigan is finally feeling like she's got some friends. But then at Home Train one morning, a mysterious note appears, and it threatens to share the secret that they are all keeping. Then the note burns itself up, so there's no evidence to show for it. Morrigan feels that everyone will hate and judge her for being a Wundersmith if everyone found out about her, in the same way that she experienced ridicule and judgment when she was living in Jackalfax for being a cursed child, and she doesn't want to experience that again. At school, Morrigan is cornered by 5 students who are quite threatening, and they pin her to a tree and throw flying stars at her head. They do this because they want to know about her classified knack. In her panic, Morrigan accidentally uses Wonder, and she stops the throwing stars in the air and pushes everyone back. Then a second note comes, aimed at Thadia. Her knack is combat, and the note says that she needs to throw her next fight. Unit 919 all put it to a vote, and Thadia does throw the fight, but she hates that she has to do it. Then the next note comes for Phineas, and it is to bake the most complicated cake. His knack is infused baking, and he loses a whole night making this cake. Morrigan resolves to find out who is behind all of the blackmailing. She has free time around her 2 classes and nothing better to do. But then it's a weekend, and there is a party at Hotel Deucalion, and Jack, which is Jupiter's nephew, he's home for the weekend as well. He and Morrigan are both sitting at the banister, and he's using his witness ability to assess people and tell Morrigan stories about them, and she ends up telling him about the blackmail that her unit is experiencing. It reminds Jack of a black mail, and he gives her a piece of paper, and he says that if Morrigan writes a message on it, it will disappear and reappear to notify him. Jack does this because Jupiter has been away investigating the missing people, so it kind of gives Morrigan a bit of a lifeline and makes her not feel so alone. Jupiter then arrives at the party, and he is swept away by the Stealth, who are the next level of police above the Stink, and Fen appears and pushes Jack and Morrigan off to bed. She sends them away and the party ends. In class during that week, Unit 919 explore Trixie lanes. The lanes play tricks on you as expected, and the further into the lane you go, the more intense the trick, but Morrigan manages to push past one of the Trixie lanes and ends up in a strange place. A man is there painting a sign for the Ghastly Market, and Morrigan overhears strange conversations about fetching a fair price. She therefore flees and runs back to Cadence and Hawthorne to tell them everything that happened. Mildmay then walks the whole class back to Home Train, but Heloise appears and interrupts them, saying that Morrigan is to blame for her friend Alfie's disappearance because he would never write the note that he left behind. Heloise was one of the 5 who attacked Morrigan earlier in the story with throwing stars, and she's so enraged at Alfie's disappearance that she uses one of the stars and cuts Miss Cheery's cheek. And Morrigan, who is enraged that she's seen someone she cares about get hurt, summons Wonder without thinking about it. Morrigan can't control it and she ends up breathing a ball of fire, and some of it catches Heloise on the way out. Thankfully, the scholar mistress Dearborn is nearby and she wields ice and she quickly douses the flames, and she sends Miss Cheery and Morrigan to the elders. After her show of power, the elders limit Morrigan's access to Wunzock and her classes, and they force her essentially into house arrest. Professor Onstold will now travel to the Hotel Deucalion to deliver Morrigan's lessons directly. During this meeting, one of the elders protests that Morrigan should learn the wretched arts, but they aren't listened to. Then on the first Friday night of the summer holidays, Morrigan goes with Hawthorne to the Nevermoor Bazaar. Hawthorne takes Morrigan to his favourite place, which is 3 streets full to the brim of sweet vendors. While exploring, Morrigan gets lost in a Trixie Lane, and Cadence, who has been watching her, pulls her back out, saying that Morrigan was right about the Ghastly Market, and the two of them go off together to go and find the Ghastly Market. They put on animal masks as disguises when they get to the market, leaving Hawthorne behind, and they manage to find the missing Magnificub, and they pretend to be part of the market and they place bids to win the cub. Technically, they don't have the money to pay for the cub, but Cadence has her knack, and so she convinces people who are in charge that they have paid for it, and so they're on their way escaping with Magnificub when Morrigan stops them both. She sees a tank with Alfie in it and she exclaims, "Alfie," and everyone in the market almost goes to a standstill and they all turn to stare at them. Knowing that they've been discovered and in a panic, Morrigan summons Wonder and turns the Magnificub into a giant raging beast as a distraction, and Morrigan and Cadence manage to escape while the Magnificub is causing havoc. Back in the Nevermoor Bazaar again, they run into Hawthorne, who has been looking for them for ages, and Morrigan remembers the blackmail paper that Jack gave her, and she writes a note on it saying get Jupiter immediately. Unfortunately, the market has been packed down and pretty much disappeared by the time Jupiter gets there, but they do find Alfie, who's been left behind. He is alive and well, but somehow his knack for breathing underwater has been removed. Now it's just after summer break and Professor Onstold has come to Hotel Deucalion to deliver Morrigan's lessons one-on-one to her. But in solidarity with Morrigan being exiled from school, the Hotel Deucalion staff and live-in residents make it extremely intolerable for Professor Onstold to deliver his lessons. And then finally, after a week, the elders invite Morrigan back to Wunzock to continue her classes as normal. This means that her decoding Nevermoor class has also been reinstated. Now Unit 919 are undertaking their exams, which means in this case that they are splitting into groups of 3 and being tested on decoding Nevermoor. They have to complete a location-based treasure hunt and then make their way back to Wunzock before sunrise. Morrigan really wishes that she was paired with her 2 friends, Hawthorne and Cadence, but she's paired with 2 others in the unit instead, Mahia and Francis. They all seem to be finding an equilibrium and making progress together, but at one point Morrigan has to go into a Trixie Lane by herself, and while she's in the Trixie Lane, she encounters the Bonesmen, those skeletal figures that she saw peripherally earlier in the book. She wishes she could control Wonder properly to save herself, and the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow sweep in and spirit her away. She chooses to go with them because it's either the Hunt or the Bonesmen, and she chooses the Hunt. The Hunt bring her to Ezra Squall. Obviously it is him transmuted on the Gossamer line, so he's not really there in body, and he teaches Morrigan that singing a tune will help summon Wonder. She ends up summoning too much though, and she asks, how do you stop it? And he turns to her and goes, why would you want to stop? Morrigan is overwhelmed and she thrusts Wonder away from her and flees from Squall. Upon returning from this impromptu lesson on Wonder, she ends up realizing that she has missed the deadline for her exam and she has caused her whole unit to fail. Everyone in the unit is ignoring her because she can't explain to them that she ran into Squall, but she does get to tell Hawthorne, who shows trust and loyalty to her and keeps talking to her even if her whole unit is ignoring her. Now, secretly, Morrigan practices summoning Wonder by herself. It doesn't stay a secret for long though, because Jupiter returns and Morrigan finds herself telling him everything. He's also proud of her that she can summon Wonder. Jupiter also says that he and Jack have something to show Morrigan, and they all take the Brolly Rail together. They end up up taking her to an adventure park created by a past Wundersmith. Onstold said in his book that this Wundersmith created a park that nobody could access, but it could be accessed, which is what the book omitted, by the local poor community that it was built for. Jack tells Morrigan that he overheard someone at his school talking about this theme park that he used to go to, and it was free entry up until he was 12, and then after that he couldn't get in anymore because he'd aged out. The past Wundersmith created this particular theme park for the people living in Gresham, and it also prevented the cost of living from skyrocketing because that space was going to be used for hotels and buildings. So in building the theme park, this Wundersmith not only gave back to the community and the children, it also stopped the locals from being pushed out of their own community by skyrocketing costs of living. Morrigan looks at the theme park and thinks she has never been happier to be excluded. Looking at the theme park, Morrigan thinks that this is her proof that Wundersmiths can do good despite what Professor Onstold says. This leads Morrigan to later confront Professor Onstold, and she tells him that his book is wrong. He knows that his book lies, but he never gets to offer an explanation. This is because Professor Mildmay happens to walk in and interrupt them, and he accidentally knocks into furniture and drops a bunch of things that he's carrying. And Morrigan sees all of this happen in slow motion. It turns out that Onstold is a timekeeper, which means he can slow down time, and he slowed down time for everyone else so that he could speed out of the room and disappear and not offer any explanation to Morrigan. Later, it is Hallowpox and Morrigan, Hawthorne, and the Hotel Deucalion are amping up for a party. But the stealth interrupt it, saying there are 3 more reported missing people and leftover bones, meaning that the Bones men took them. Based on overhearing the stealth's conversation, Morrigan deducts that Professor Onstold is one of the people that is missing, and the stealth also report to Jupiter that the ghastly market is being assembled again. For their own protection, everyone is confined indoors, but they don't want to not celebrate Hallowpox, so they go to the roof of Hotel Deucalion and they go ahead with the seance event that they wanted to do anyway. But halfway through, the seance goes wrong. Everybody but Morrigan goes limp, and Ezra Squall appears. It's revealed that Squall is tapping into the surplus of Morrigan's wondrous power. She's been gathering wonder to her for weeks, and it's been burning her out and she hasn't realized. Squall said he's been burning it off for her, like that time he turned the Magnificub huge, but the breathing of fire, that was all Morrigan. He forces her to practice control, which will force him out from tapping into her power. And while this seems counterintuitive, he needs her alive in order for his plans to work out, rather than for her to be burned out by wonder. Squall also says that the ghastly market took Cadence and Lambeth to be sold at auction. In exchange for Morrigan controlling her power, he said he'd show her where the ghastly market is. And then to manipulate Morrigan into following him, he controls Hawthorne and forces him to jump from the roof. Morrigan chases after him and grabs him, but they both fall. They are caught by the hunt of Smoke and Shadow and spirited away to the ghastly market. At the location of the ghastly market, they meet Mildmay and ask if the stealth are on their way, but Mildmay tries to get them to leave, saying he can't do this anymore. Morrigan realizes that Mildmay is the society member insider who has been instigating the kidnappings. Squall and the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow intimidate Mildmay, who shifts his focus and smirks, and Morrigan and Hawthorne realize that he was just trying to stall them while the auctions were taking place, and so they charge inside. They see Cadence and Lambeth, and they also see Israfel, who is strung up as well. It's revealed that Lambeth is actually a secret princess, and her title is Princess Lamia of the Wintersea Republic. And this status combined with her oracle ability means that she will potentially fetch a high price at auction. In desperation, Morrigan summons Wonder and causes a destructive chain reaction to the museum, which is where the ghastly market is being held. This, as you would expect, causes an epic distraction, and to aid her, Onstold slows down time. Morrigan and Hawthorne split. Hawthorne frees Cadence. Morrigan frees Israfel and tells him to save Lambeth, and she tries to, but she can't get to Onstold in time. An understanding passes between Morrigan and Onstold, and he tells her to run. She doesn't understand why someone who hates Wundersmiths would sacrifice their life to save one. After all of this has occurred, Jupiter explains that they have made 5 arrests thanks to an anonymous tip, which Morrigan suspects was Ezra Squall, and unfortunately Mildmay appears to have escaped. Morrigan explains that Squall controlled Wonder through her, and Jupiter apologizes because he's seen Wonder gathering around her, but he didn't know what it meant. He also apologizes for letting Squall take advantage of her, and then he takes Morrigan to see the scholar mistress Murgatroyd. Before she learns them from a more dangerous source, Jupiter demands to Murgatroyd that Morrigan be taught the wretched arts finally. The scholar mistress therefore accepts Morrigan into her School of Arcane Arts. Then later on, at an announcement event for Professor Onstold's service, Morrigan is slipped her own note for being blackmailed. It turns out she has to reveal herself as being a Wundersmith or Lambeth's secret will be revealed. The blackmail was never about Morrigan at all, and Unit 919 had protected her all this time, so now it is Morrigan's turn to protect them in return. When she gets the chance to, she tells everybody at the assembly that she is a Wundersmith. And then after a pause, Elder Quinn turns to Unit 919 and congratulates them on their 5th trial, which was the loyalty test. Afterwards though, Lambeth approaches Unit 919 and explains her secret so everybody is in the know. They all declare that they are loyal for life and brothers and sisters, and they will of course keep her secret too. Lambeth and Cadence are waiting for Morrigan, and Hawthorne says he will see her at lunchtime. Then they go to class together on sub-level 6, which is the School of Arcane Arts. And that brings us to the end of Wundersmith. And now we're on to the 3rd book, HOLLOWPOX, which is set 6 weeks after Unit 919 passed their loyalty trial. The whole unit is attending their last class of the autumn or fall season, and their classes don't usually match, so this is quite unusual. They go to this mysterious class called C&D, which Elder Quinn introduces as containment and distraction. Unit 919 are then shown footage of themselves from, books 1 and 2, but in the shadows there have actually been horrible monsters that have quickly been contained by other society members before they can even notice. Lambeth the Oracle, however, noticed these monsters on day 1 but didn't say anything. Elder Quinn also shares that the society was founded by 9 Wundersmiths, and their mission was to serve, protect, and improve the lives of Nevermoor. But one of these Wundersmiths toiled in secret to build an army of monsters and take power for himself. Thankfully, he failed and he was exiled, and this is Ezra Squall, who tried to conquer and enslave Nevermoor. Now the Wondrous Society's purpose is to protect Nevermoor from the corrupt, dangerous creations of Wundersmith's past and close old wounds. Unit 919 are then shown to the Gathering Place, where there is a plan set by the Society to distract the public from monsters during a celebration called Golders Week. This is why everyone judges the past Wundersmiths. It's because they left so much work for the Society to constantly clean up. Morrigan tells herself that she didn't cause any of this, but people label her wrongly anyway, and later Jupiter apologizes that he couldn't talk to her about C&D. He says it wasn't his secret to share, but he does promise that her protection is first and foremost his priority. And when he brings her a cake with all of this written in the icing as an apology, she sighs and accepts. Now it's the holiday season and it is almost Christmas Eve, and Morrigan is in the daily habit of summoning a little bit of wonder. Practicing like this means that she will stop herself from attracting wonder, and she can instead channel it away from her to stop it becoming a critical mass, which is what Ezra Squall described it as. Most people in Nevermoor knew Squall as the last Wundersmith, and they speak about him as if he's an imaginary bogeyman. Obviously, Morrigan knows that he is much more real, alive, and present than everybody thinks. At a Christmas Eve event, Morrigan meets up with Hawthorne and his entire family, but because it's so busy and they're going to catch a train home, they end up splitting up. Hawthorne and Morrigan say that they'll see Hawthorne's family shortly, and they take Hawthorne's 3-year-old sister with them. Oddly, a Wunnimal, which is a sentient animal, boards the train. She's a jaguar and she's behaving strangely. Hawthorne's sister, who is completely oblivious to the Wunnimal on the train, makes a loud noise and seems to startle the jaguar, who looks directly at the baby and at Morrigan. Morrigan starts to panic, realizing that she is being targeted by the jaguar, but before it can attack or strike, a bunch of ladies drive it off the train by attacking it with their purses. And then on Christmas Day, there is a newspaper article. It's about Juvela, and she is a famous singer who is also a Wunnimal jaguar, and she is found catatonic in the snow. Morrigan recognizes her because she's wearing the same jewelry and says this is the Wunnimal that attacked them on the train. Back at Wunzock, it's the first day of school, and Miss Murgatroyd grabs Morrigan, and Morrigan was intent on finding her anyway so that she can start learning the wretched arts finally. It seems like the scholar mistress had the same thought, and she drags her into an elevator pod. They travel down to sub-level 9 and the elevator doors open open into complete darkness, and Morrigan doesn't really want to go out there by herself, and Miss Murgatroyd then starts her shape-shifting. The persona that appears calls herself Rook, and she says that it is time for Morrigan to follow her and learn the wondrous arts. Rook takes Morrigan to the Sub-9 academic group, which she calls the Basement Nerds, but they're all excited and welcoming to Morrigan. The professor introduces himself as Connell, and a Fox 1 student introduces herself as Sophia, and they are going to be Morrigan's new supervisors. In her first proper class the following day, Sophia and Connell show Morrigan what are called the ghostly hours, and they are records and captures in time that Morrigan or anyone can enter to view the previous Wundersmiths, and in this way Morrigan can learn from the past Wundersmiths directly. But the ghostly hours only appear at certain points in time, and these points in time are chronicled by the Book of Ghostly Hours. Interestingly, this is the book of Professor Hemingway Q. Onstald's life's work, because he was part of the academic group before he decided he hated Wundersmiths and left. On a tour of Sub-9, Sophia and Connell show Morrigan to a door called the Liminal Hall, and they're secretly hoping that because she's a Wundersmith she can open it, but when she presses her finger to the door nothing happens. And then before you know it, it's Golder's night, and Morrigan, part of Unit 919 and only inducted to be learning, is paired with someone older for the distraction to take place that night. The person that she is paired with is Heloise. Neither of them like each other. Heloise is the person who threw throwing stars at Morrigan in book 2, and while they are arguing they spot Brutalus, who is a professor at the Wondrous Society, in a nearby alley. Notably, he is a bear one and he's acting very bear-like. When Brutalus notices them, Morrigan sees his eyes flash green before he begins to charge. While they're both running away, Heloise falls and Brutalus charges straight past her, seeming to pursue Morrigan. Morrigan's only hope is going into a nearby Trixie lane, and she manages to escape through it. She emerges from the other end of the lane with a slash to her leg, and she collapses to the ground completely exhausted. When she finally rouses herself and stands up, she's found by other society members emerging from the nearby sewers, and Thadia happens to be with them, and she catches Morrigan, and before Morrigan passes out she insists on being taken to the hotel. Morrigan spends a week in hospital recovering from her injury, and during that time she has a lot of visitors, and she tells Jupiter what happened but only remembers the green flashing eyes part when she gets visited by Hawthorne and Cadence. A week later, Morrigan is helping backstage at the opera with Miss Dame Chanda. She's helping out in costumes when she sees one of the crew, a horse one, start acting a bit strange. The horse one's eyes flash green and then it goes into a frenzy and it runs Dame Chanda down on stage. The horse one jumps off stage and flees, and Fenestra chases after it. And later on, Fenestra says that the stealth collected the horse one once he'd passed out. She says that it looked like there was something in him that he was desperately trying to get out, and in that desperation it kind of made him crazy. At the gathering place, Jupiter heads up a meeting of all the society members, and it's a meeting about the Wundermoor virus, and they've called it Hollowpox. They're currently looking for a cure, but it leaves the host empty after it has disappeared. With really nothing else to do, Morrigan continues her classes and she learns weaving, which summons wonder to create. She learns the skill during one of the ghostly hours lessons, and after the lesson fades, she realizes that she can't get up because she's overtaxed herself, but at the same time she's really pleased and proud of herself that she is becoming a Wundersmith. Morrigan is so happy that she's becoming a Wundersmith that she starts to get obsessed with the ghostly hours, and she starts skipping time that she would usually spend with Unit 919 to go to all of these different ghostly hours before and after classes as well. So she's spending all of her class time and all of her free time in the ghostly hours. In these pockets of time reflected in the ghostly hours, she sees Ezra Squall and realizes that his name isn't on any of the official records in the book, and so she ends up going on a squall hunt herself. Then during a distractions class, Unit 919 are split up and given the mission to steal something. Thadia calls Morrigan out on ditching Unit 919 constantly and not shutting up about the ghostly hours. While they're out and about, all of the unit overhears a nearby protester screeching about Wundermools, and Lamb sees something not great and manages to get them all out in time before a fight breaks loose. Back on home train, Miss Cheery tells everybody that their last day of classes is cancelled due to a last-minute Hollowpox meeting, and they all decide to go and visit a library on their last day instead. It is called the Goblane Library, or the Gob. Wondrous members get special access, and it is a pocket universe, so it's a copy and paste of Nevermoor from a fixed moment in time. It is also full to the brim with books, and sometimes the inhabitants can escape from these books. Miss Cheery gets all of Unit 919 into a visit of the library because she has a connection, and that connection connection is her ex-girlfriend Roshni, who she says, "Look, it'll only be an hour, I promise we'll be good." And Roshni reluctantly goes, "Okay, fine, I'll take you for a tour." While they are inside the library, Morrigan finds a whole section dedicated to the Wundersmiths, and it's books and volumes written by the past Wundersmith that Morrigan has seen in the ghostly hours and is obsessed with. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a library card though, and so she attempts to steal one of the volumes. Cadence catches Morrigan trying to steal the book and not doing a very good job of it, and calls her out for being an obsessive weirdo, and Morrigan pleads with her, and Cadence covers for her so Morrigan can try and steal the book. But at the last second, alarms chime and Roshni warns that there is a book bug attack. Previously, a book that was about bugs was so popular and got checked out from the library so often, and it was open and closed too many times, and some bugs escaped from inside the book, and they have since bred, and now they are just prolific in the library to the point where they don't try and get them back into the book anymore, they just kill them on sight because there's so many of them. They're a nuisance and a pest, and they swarm Unit 919. These are huge bugs, like they're the size of cats. Roshni pages her other staff for help, so she pages Colin and his crew of book fighters to come in and help fight off the book bugs. Miss Cheery helps all of Unit 919 back into the coach as they fight their way through book bugs and slime, and in amidst the chaos, Morrigan accidentally drops the book. In the coach, Morrigan lights a very small fire using her Inferno skill, and she does this because Hawthorne is covered from head to toe in slime and he's shivering, and when she lights the flame, Lamb turns to her, Lambeth, and goes, "Put that out." And in the panic of the moment, Morrigan startles, there is a fight outside, and she accidentally escalates the fire into a big woof of flame. This distracts Colin, who is an ostrich one, and he looks directly at Unit 919 with a flash of green light, and he has been overtaken by the Hollowpox and he goes into his own frenzy. Miss Cheery manages to get Unit 919 out, and she instructs Morrigan to go and get Jupiter and the Stealth immediately. Jupiter continues to investigate the Hollowpox over the summer holidays, but unless you're a witness, the Hollowpox is pretty impossible to spot. Jack volunteers his time so he can help out Jupiter on the Hollowpox investigation. Due to the rise of Hollowpox in the media, there is a rise in anti-Wundermal rallies, and these rallies are led by Lawrence St. James, and he is the head of the Concerned Citizens of Nevermoor party. Lots of places get locked down due to isolating from the Hollowpox, and that means the summer is quiet, but Frank wants to throw a party at the Hotel Deucalion. This party goes from being a dinner to a whole gala while Jupiter is away. One guest, who is a gatecrasher, says nasty things about Wundermals and targets Fen the Magnificat as well, but then when Fen shows that she has a spine and she sticks up for herself, this woman freaks out and says that she's got the Hollowpox, and it spooks everybody at the party. To stop everybody frantically running and looking around, Morrigan summons Veil, so she puts a shadow over everybody to stop them from perceiving Fen. But Morrigan sees a green light hovering nearby in the darkness. In confusion, Morrigan asks Jack whether he can see it hovering nearby too, and he confirms that he can. It's almost like the Hollowpox seems to be a living thing, and then suddenly thuds ring out from in the darkness. More panic ensues and Morrigan drops the veil. 3 Wundermal bodies are lying on the floor in suspended comas. Morrigan sees the Hollowpox as little dots of green light flee the premises. After the summer holidays, Morrigan is back at school, but the tone is pretty much the same as it has been previously in terms of addressing the confusion and the distress around the Hollowpox epidemic and nobody really having a cure or knowing what to do. In between her classes going to the ghostly hours, Morrigan runs into Connell and Sophia, and they're discussing the possible next moves for the Society and for Parliament regarding what to do to defend Wundermals and protect their rights. Morrigan heads to her ghostly hours lesson, but then shortly after it fades, Ezra Squall appears to her on the rooftop where her lesson was taking place. He offers her an ultimatum, which is become his apprentice and he will give her the cure for the Hollowpox. Morrigan is absolutely outraged. She suspected that he created it, but he's obviously just confirmed it to her, and now he's blackmailing her. She obviously doesn't accept his offer, and she also asks the question that has been burning in her mind since attending the ghostly hours, and that question is, why did he kill all of the other Wundersmiths? She says, why did you kill all your friends? And he hisses at her that Wundersmiths don't have friends before he disappears. Lawrence St. James leads a mob of protesters to the Wunzock gates, and in the chaos of protesting against Wundermals, they riot and break through the gate. Morrigan fears the worst, and she can just see a fight breaking out between these protesters and the Society, and she doesn't want that to happen, so she decides decides to build a distraction instead. Her thoughts are spurned by the conversation she had earlier with Sophia, the fox one, who said we are all on the same side. Morrigan runs to the nearby extinct fire blossom trees and she manages to ignite them all, which in their outbursts and flurry distract the mob and any fighting that may have ensued. Morrigan later tells Jupiter about Squall visiting her and offering her that ultimatum, and Jupiter believes that Squall probably created Hollowpox, but he also says don't let him get into your head and manipulate you. Then a few days later, an anonymous source leaks to the public that Morrigan is a Wundersmith, and a reporter takes a photo of her in the Hotel Deucalion. There is no proof that Morrigan is a Wundersmith, and so a reward is offered for anyone who can obtain proof. Anna, who is part of Unit 919 and her knack is magic involved with being a doctor, she tells Unit 919 an update about all of the Wunimals who have had the Hollowpox. She's been working with them and caring for them, and she says that they are waking up, but this is not good news because they're not waking up as Wunimals, they're waking up as animals. They don't have their sentience and thought processes that they used to before they got the Hollowpox. With that reward hanging over Morrigan's head, a bunch of journalists gather at the doors to Hotel Deucalion and harass for days and days and days. Morrigan's door to home train also stops working as the society has put a stop to her classes while all of this media kerfuffle pans out. Which is ironic because Jupiter finds out that the Wonder Society are the ones who leaked the fact that Morrigan is a Wundersmith to the media to distract everybody from the Hollowpox epidemic that is going on. Holiday Wu, who is a key journalist, comes and dresses Morrigan up for an interview with the goal in mind to take hold of the media narrative, but Jupiter returns and intervenes just in time. That same night, Morrigan's finger glows and it had been itching for days. An inferno symbol, kind of like her Wunzok symbol, has appeared on her middle finger, and Morrigan sneaks out and goes to Wunzok to trial this new mark on whether it will open the liminal hall. This time it does open and she ends up meeting a divinity, and the divinity is named Kindling and is obviously linked to the magic of fire. Kindling is mourning the loss of the other Wundersmiths and doesn't get visits anymore, and says to Morrigan, please come and continue to visit me. Then on her way out of Wunzok after she snuck in, Morrigan runs into Sophia and is excited to tell her about her new Inferno mark. But at the last second, Morrigan sees in dismay that Sophia has been overtaken by the Hollowpox. Morrigan casts a line of flame in front of her just as Sophia is about to lunge, and by the time these flames have died down, Sophia slumps to the ground and passes out. After seeing what happened to her friend, Morrigan is sick of the Hollowpox, sick of waiting, nobody has a cure, and so she takes matters into her own hands. She goes and rides the Gossamer line, intent on finding a cure to the Hollowpox, intending to find Ezra Squall, but the line misreads her intentions and takes her to somebody else instead. Morrigan appears in front of the president of the Wintersea Republic, and this president, she knows who Morrigan is, but she also won't give Morrigan the cure for free. Her name is Maud and she's the Wintersea president, and she requests a meeting with President Steed of Nevermoor, the Free State. Then returning to the hotel, Morrigan tells Jupiter everything. He gets angry at her and says, why did you do anything when adults are looking into it? She blows up at him and they have a fight, and she said that she had to do something because nothing is changing, and she pushes him to get a meeting happening with President Steed for a cure. She says that if Steed won't accept help from the Wintersea Republic, then she'll have to go and accept help from Ezra Squall. Both presidents do end up meeting, but Steed turns down the offer of a cure from the Wintersea Republic due to his pride. Meanwhile, the Hollowpox is escalating as an epidemic in Nevermoor, and Holiday Wu obtains a letter from the Wintersea Republic and publishes it for everybody in Nevermoor to see. The media go wild, the public riot and ignore lockdowns, and Steed finally agrees to an emissary visit from the Wintersea Republic. But Morrigan, in hearing that news, realizes that she might have been manipulated into allowing Ezra Squall to physically visit Nevermoor. But then Squall appears in the hotel from the Gossamer line, so he's not really there, and he's all in a desperate panic. He says to Morrigan that she can't be let in the Wintersea Republic because she will take over and destroy Nevermoor as she's done to other states previously. She is the one who actually commissioned him, and he created Hollowpox for her because she wanted to wipe out all of the Wunimals in the Wintersea Republic. Then, via Wunimals who didn't know they were carrying the disease, she sent the virus to Nevermoor so she could later on maneuver a way in with a deal. Ultimately, to protect Nevermoor, Squall says to Morrigan that he will teach her how to cure the Hollowpox in exchange for the Wintersea Republic president not getting into the border. Under Squall's instruction, Morrigan summons Wonder, which turns out to be like a beacon to the Hollowpox, and explains why a lot of the incidents with the Hollowpox occurred near her. The Hollowpox is indeed a monster and a parasite, and in summoning that much wonder, infected Wunimals are also attracted to her and they come as well. This is all happening nearby Hotel Deucalion, and Fenestra sees what Morrigan is doing and comes out to defend her against all of the attacking Wunimals. Morrigan summons Inferno, and the Hollowpox jumps out of all of the Wunimals at that show of power. It's like the Hollowpox recognized the show of power as being very similar to Squall's, who created it, and it's now waiting for Morrigan's next command. Squall and Fen both encourage her and say that she can do it, and Morrigan gives the Hollowpox the command to die. All of the lights go out. Morrigan then wakes up in hospital. It turns out she burnt herself out using that much power, and she's been asleep for 2 whole days, but it's confirmed that the emissary never visited from the Wintersea Republic, so the borders to Nevermoor remained closed. When Jupiter visits her in hospital, she tells him absolutely everything, and together they stitch a story together so that when Morrigan recounts all the events to the elders, Ezra Squall is not mentioned. Morrigan's friend Anna visits her that night and gives her an update on the latest Wunimal situation. They are all going to be moved to another facility to be cared for, and Morrigan only has a very small window of time to say goodbye to her friend Sophia, the former Fox one. After Anna has left, it is nighttime, and in the darkness, Morrigan summons the Hunt of Smoke and Shadow and says that she needs to speak to Squall. Squall appears to her and says that he's been waiting on her to call him. He says that he technically did as promised, which was destroying the Hollowpox, and Morrigan disagrees and says that you promised a cure. Morrigan continues to insist that she needs a cure for all the Wunimals that are existing that had the Hollowpox and aren't getting better. Unfortunately, because she's so burned out, Morrigan doesn't have any power accessible to her, and so finally she ends up making the deal with Ezra to become his apprentice in exchange for him healing all of the existing Wunimals, and he pilots her power and channels through her in order to do that. Squall weaves a reversal of the Hollowpox over each and every individual Wunimal that was infected, and they all come back to themselves, and in channeling his power, Morrigan finally understands the depth of how powerful Squall's abilities as a Wundersmith are. After the Wunimals are healed, Squall presents a contract for becoming his apprentice, and Morrigan signs it. She could have pulled out. She technically didn't have to sign it because he'd held up his end of the bargain and done what he'd promised in healing the Wunimals and curing the Hollowpox. But Morrigan signs partly on her own selfishness, because now that she has tasted the power of what a true Wundersmith should feel like, she really wants to learn that for herself, and so she follows through with her end of the promise and becomes his apprentice. When Squall disappears, and after all of this, Morrigan is absolutely exhausted, and she leaves the hospital in the middle of the night, makes her way to Hotel Deucalion, and falls asleep in her nice, warm and cozy bed. And that is the end of Hollowpox. And now you are all caught up to go straight into Silverborn by Jessica Townsend. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.